readers, and welcome back to the LA Reads podcast. We're your hosts, Abby
and Leighton, and today is episode, I'm not sure, but
I think it's 10.
Episode 10, and it is Crescent City 1 and 2.
I'm so excited. This is going to be our part 1 of talking about Crescent City. So like Leighton said, we'll be talking about the first 2 books in the Crescent City. We'll save House of Flame and Shadow for next episode, which will be our last episode of the SJM,
which is crazy.
Saga.
But that just needs its own episode to just unpack.
I also need to reread it because I think we were just talking about this, that I think I forgot like half the things that happened in that book.
Oh, facts. I was worried about giving away spoilers in this to House of Flame and Shadow until I realized I don't remember anything in that book. So there's no way.
Okay. First, before we dive in, though, let's hear what you've been reading this week. Lele,
oh my gosh.
I'm sure you have a list.
Shoot, I do have a list.
It's the ice.
Oh my gosh. So much concern. Just barely. I need to pull it up on my app because I quite literally already forgot what I read. Okay. I read the entire Wolf Hotel series, which is 5 books.
Mm-hmm.
They were all free on Audible because I don't know. I'm sure everybody's heard at this point. Audible had a bunch of free books. So I read all 5 of them. Just casually.
The fact that you read that many, listen to that many audiobooks is so impressive to me.
Well, for work, I had to do a lot of canvassing, which is just walking outside and delivering things this week for hours. So I had an audiobook on for like 50% of the day, always. Then I read Lilac by B.B. Reed, which somebody suggested to me in the comments of our TikTok, and you're the best because I loved that book.
Oh.
And then I also read A Million Kisses in Your Lifetime by Monica Murphy, and I liked it so much that I went on a full-on 3-hour scavenger hunt to go find it at a Barnes & Noble, and then I found books 1, 2, 4, and 5, and 3's MIA. So I hope it's not that good, because I'm not reading it anytime soon.
I'm dead. Well, the dedication we have to buying books, I'm thoroughly impressed.
I know. I went from one Barnes & Noble to another, and it was like, oh, that will be an hour and 20 minutes. I was like, sure, route me.
Girl,
I'll go.
There's not very many Barnes & Nobles in Utah either. They're kind of spread out. So
yeah.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Okay, this week, I honestly feel like I started a lot of books, but I didn't finish them. I did listen to House of Earth and Blood, so I listened to that again.
Love.
And then I started Taming 7.
Gypsy.
I know. I started it just barely, so I haven't finished it yet. But I don't think I actually finished any other books this week. I think I've been reading a book called A Door in the Dark. I think it's what it's called.
You told me about that. Yeah.
Yes, they sent it to me, so I have to post about it next week. So I'm like, I really need it. Get on that. Yeah. Anyways, so I was more in a weird reading slump thing. Also, I was so busy this week, and I was just telling Leighton I had the urge to write again, even though I'm not going to be hearing back from my editor until May 11th. I've got a date. She'll be done May 11th.
Wait, that's kind of soon.
I know. I'm so scared. Anyways, but for funsies, I just plotted out a idea for a YA romance series. Kind of fun. So that's what
I love a good interconnected standalone.
Exactly. The romance was significantly easier to plot.
Yeah. You're like, wow, I can write this so fast.
Yes, I was like, wow. Anyways, okay. Anything else? Any other announcements from this week?
No, just
exciting news?
Spoiler warnings.
Okay, cool. Okay, because Crescent City, this is spoiler warning for all of SJM. So
yeah, everything. I
know that I will be talking about things with ACOTAR and Throne of Glass. This is for everything. So if you have not finished all of SJM, all of her books, highly recommend logging off. Come back when you have finished all of the series. You can go back and listen to all of our other episodes if you want. We now have 2 episodes for ACOTAR, 2 episodes of Throne of Glass. This is your warning. We will not be holding back, including House of Flame and Shadow spoilers.
Yes.
So you have been warned. And yeah.
We hope to see you later.
We hope to see you later if you come. If you plan on not reading her books, though, and you just want to listen to us ramble, Great. Fantastic.
I actually do that all the time with books where I'm like, I'm not going to read this, but I'm curious.
This was targeted towards our parents who listen to our episodes and have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, my parents every time, wow, that was such a good episode. Never read a Sarah J Maas book in their life.
My dad was making fun of me because he's like, I can't even put up your podcast to like 1.25 speed because you already talk too fast.
I know. I feel so bad though because you talk a lot faster than I do.
I know.
So sometimes I try and speed up to match your pace and then my brain turns to mush and I can't do it. I can't compute that fast.
I know. Okay. I've been doing better though. I've been trying. So
it's a talent though.
I try. Anyways, okay, let's start with CC1. Can I go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Because I just wanted to say, this is the third time, so I listened to it this time.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like when you're listening, it might feel a little bit different because I feel like it makes books feel less long.
For sure.
But when I'm listening to it and I just look at this book as a whole, truly, I feel like this is like perfect blueprint of like what a fantasy book should be, where you have like such a good strong beginning, you have such good world building, confusing as frick, but like so
confusing.
Good. And then you have such like a spin-off like moment when Danica and the wolf pack die, and then you have this like mystery that they're having to, the romance was perfect, the way that the book ends is perfect. I just felt like the way that everything happens in this book is genuinely so perfect, it's become a comfort read to me.
A comfort read?
Yes.
I would not go so far to say comfort.
I don't know why. I just felt like it was so perfect, and I love every little part that happens in it. I don't know. This book, it makes me so sad because I feel like CC1 was such a strong start for a book series.
So strong, yeah.
And CC2 went downhill so fast.
I will say my favorite in the entire Crescent City series is CC1.
Yeah.
I think pretty much every book got worse for me, personally. However, I do think it's a great, I don't want to say starter read, but it's kind of textbook in the sense that one of the reasons I enjoyed Fourth Wing so much is because we got to the parapet so fast. Like, first 40 pages, stuff was happening.
Yes.
And I think with the Pack of Devils and Danica dying and everything right out of the gate, it kind of has that same effect where you don't have to go through an info dump in the first 100 pages. Yes, there's info dumpy parts.
Yes.
But you at least get a taste of what it can be before.
I think the thing is that the characters like Bryce and Danica, they're actively doing something as the info dumps are coming.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like sometimes it's like, hey, let's sit down and chat. And the characters aren't doing anything. They're just giving info dumps. And that's when you get a headache. Granted, there's a lot to understand about CC, like of the Crescent City world. I feel like I am still now just fully understanding it. And there's even things that I'm like, I still have not a single clue what's going on.
Well, I think it's because it's where all three of her series converge. Yes. And so there's a lot of explanation that's necessary. But I think even in House of Flame and Shadow, obviously, we'll dive deeper into it later, but you find out where Bryce's power is from and everything. Mm-hmm. And that felt very info dumpy to me.
Oh,
because
it's like
her and
10 pages or something like that.
Yeah. She's sitting back watching it unfold, and it's just like a narration of everything that happened.
Yeah.
So that part wasn't my favorite, but I think I like Crescent City 1 so much because they don't do that.
Yes, and I feel like, anyways, I don't know why, but I definitely think that if I'm looking at the books that Sarah J Maas has written, I would honestly say that CC1 was probably one of her strongest books that she's written. As far as like just overall like plotting and world building and stuff. It makes me really sad because it felt like it was such a strong start and this book series was going so many places, and in the second book it was just like she knew where it wanted to end and she just was trying to like get them there and wasn't really caring as much. I don't know. It felt weird.
I think I watch Carrie Kinread's recap videos all the time, and she just explains it as she got lost in the sauce.
No, that's so true.
That it just...
that is literally the most accurate way to describe it. But yeah, but CC1, I loved it. Bryce and Hunt's relationship in CC1 is probably the only time that I actually liked the relationship.
So I had this realization. Okay, we're going to circle back to another point I have, but I had this realization where at the end of House of Flame and Shadow, I don't really like Bryce. She's probably my least favorite FMC out of all the FMCs that between, I guess, Feyre and Aelin. And in CC1, I love her.
I love her.
So Aelin coded, and she's always doing things. I love how Sarah J Maas writes when you assume a character's doing something, but then you get kind of like an off page what they're actually doing, and then it comes full circle. So, for example, she finds out Danica and I think his name was Maximus or something at the very beginning of the book are connected, and then she goes to the nail.
Tertian is, I think, is his name.
Whoever it was, they go to the nail salon, and Hunt's like following her around, and it's like she's such a socialite, she's such a party girl. But she found out that like Maximus's girlfriend was the nail tech, so she went and interrogated her, and then you just get a lot of like,
yes,
you also assume that she's kind of airheaded, but then you get the explanation. You're like, wait, she's thinking so hard, and that's so Aelin coded, and I love it. But in the later books, instead of being witty and smart and independent, I feel like it turns into my way or the highway, and I'm above telling anybody else. I even have a mate at this point, and he doesn't even get a no.
Yeah.
And that gets very bothersome.
No, it definitely does. And I feel like, too, what's hard, and we've talked about this before, too, is that you start to see a lot of similarities between some of these characters of the other characters that she's written in other books.
Absolutely.
And it does make me sad because I do feel like Bryce was such a strong character in the beginning, like you said. But then, again, like, we see, as the reader, I see that, like, those types of plot points where she's, like, does things where, like, and then it all comes full circle like that. Again, I see that as Aelin, and we see that as Aelin coded. It's not Bryce.
True.
And so I do feel like sometimes SJM has a habit of like pulling the strong points from other characters she's written and putting them into these characters in CC. And I'm like, no, like let them
make your own character.
Make new characters, like make them stand on their own. And I think that they do have parts that are like new or exciting to them, but at the same time, I'm like, you are basically just like rewriting the same thing with a different font. Sometimes it feels like. Yeah.
Arguably, I think a lot of people say Rune and Reese are very similar. Amryn and Fury are very similar.
Yes. But at the same time, those ones, I feel like there's a purpose to.
I hope we can get into that.
And it's like, but like there are sometimes like that, like the similarities between Bryce and Aelin and like those types of scenes, that is when the similarities start to come to fruition. And I'm like, I don't love that.
Yeah, I think I like it just because I'm so obsessed with Aelin, but I agree that's the reason I like it, not because, oh, Bryce is so smart, Bryce is such a great character.
Exactly.
She's reminiscent of one of my favorite characters.
100%. That's why it's like kind of a bummer. I'm like, dang.
Yeah. Another thing, anything else? Which I think this is great for some people. Okay. And not great for others.
Okay.
It's just the fact that this is a modern fantasy. It's a very niche genre. It is a genre that I don't particularly care for. When I'm reading a fantasy book, I want it to be fantasy. Like, I'm picturing Brandon Sanderson, Jade City, Name of the Wind, like full-fledged high fantasy. And when we get the modern day references, I've mentioned in one of our previous episodes, one of my biggest pet peeves is like super niche pop culture references.
Yeah.
It's littered in this book. It gives me so much stress. Just random things. Generally, we have like phones are in the mix, which is kind of weird. Lahaba, she loves reality TV and dating shows, and that's mentioned. Rune practically lives in a frat house with all the boys. The part when she pulls out Jelly Jubilee and she collects rainbow unicorns. Like, I can't even say that with a straight face. She refers to Bryce as an alpha hole.
Oh, yes.
The entire time. Bryce at one point pretends to be paparazzi to get out of a dicey situation. She literally at the end of the book, when she's fighting Micah, they airplay it. They're like, okay, let me airplay this so everybody can watch it. Not saying it's bad. It's just different.
It's very different. I actually really like it because I do think it's really different, and I think that that's really cool to like push the boundaries. And I appreciate too that she definitely did not go into it half-heartedly. She wasn't like, I'm gonna make this urban fantasy world, but I'm gonna like, but they're not gonna have phones or like the tech like is gonna be like, she definitely like went full-fledged with it, which I appreciate, because it would have been weird if she would have been like, yes, they have this high-tech world, but they don't have phones, and no, they can't do this, and they can't, like, you know what I mean, like, it makes sense. But yeah, definitely, I think it's a acquired taste for sure.
Yeah, and there's like some things that I didn't even grasp the first time that I read it that are random. For example, the postal service is otters with vests on or something like that. I couldn't get over that. The mech suits, very Pacific Rim, Transformers, whatever coded.
Yeah.
That was just really hard for me to wrap my head around because now it's this mixture of magic and technology, which is a really unique thing to explore, but also in my head they're very different. So seeing them come together makes my brain melt a little bit.
Well, I feel like too, because fantasy books, at the end of the day, you can make the most creative fantasy world, but relatively speaking, if you read a lot of fantasy, they're all going to start feeling like the same, and you follow along a lot faster because you're like, okay, yeah, you can expect that like fantasy worlds are going to have a magic system, and like there's going to be a prince or a king or a queen or like whatever. Like
totally.
You have like these certain plot points that are like expected in fantasy books. So when you have this, you're like, wow, everything that I know is off the table, like, and you have to sit down and try and figure it out. Like, it definitely, like I said, it's an acquired taste for sure, and I think that that's why it's either loved or hated, because they're like, this is so different, and I don't know what to expect at this point.
And as somebody, I think this would probably be one of the first urban modern fantasy books I've ever read, so I didn't really have any experiences going into it, and the only history I had was I was an avid Sarah J Maas reader, so I was expecting something along the lines of more ACOTAR and Throne of Glass. Yeah. So within the first little bit where it's like, we're at the club and we're partying and we're doing drugs, I'm like, what is going on? I don't know what book I just picked up.
The only thing that does help is at this point, you're so used to SJM's writing style that you're like, okay, at least I can follow along a little bit. That's why I'm like, there's no way. Outside of them, the books being connected and things like that, like, that's why you got to read Crescent City last, because you got to get real comfortable with SJM's style of writing to be able to even remotely understand what's going on.
Oh, totally. Another thing with this book that I thought was really interesting is Bryce's and Danica's relationship, because we established right out of the gate, they are besties. They're more than sisters. They are inseparable. They're as close as anybody could ever be, right? And then pretty much this whole book is a synopsis of how she actually didn't know a single thing about Danica and how she was constantly lying to her the entire time, which I thought it was a really interesting choice that she picked Danica and Bryce to have this foundation to turn around and be like, it was all a lie.
Yeah.
But I feel like at no point does Bryce ever really question her relationship with Danica.
No, she doesn't. And also, I feel like we start to see more of the questioning in CC2, because that's when we find out about like Project Thur and like all of that stuff, which I still don't understand. But anyways, but at least in Crescent City 1, like, you see like at the end, like when Micah like comes to her and stuff, it's like you knew that she wouldn't have like been doing those drugs. Like, you knew, and she was like, yeah, I did. Like, she was the only one that like never questioned Danica or like her loyalty or who she was. And then you see a good moment at the end when Danica helps her like do the drop and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's like the relationship was never questioned, but but like Danica's actions were questioned, I feel like, at the same time.
Which is just so interesting, because if you look at it in a bulleted list format, it's like things Danica never told Bryce about. The fact that the horn's in her back. The fact that she's a bloodhound. The fact that she has a mate in its backsand. The fact that she knew Sophie. The fact that she was working with the rebels. Yeah. Like, literally.
Project Thur, all the things.
Yeah, Project Thur, Dusk, whatever.
Yes.
Situation.
Dusk's Truth, that's what it's called.
Dusk's Truth. I'm like, she quite literally knew nothing, but then when she did that, she's like, I know Danica would never take drugs. I'm like, do you? Because you quite literally know nothing.
I know, that's why. So it is really interesting. Like, Bryce definitely has a blind loyalty, I feel like, to Danica. But I was thinking about this when I was listening again, is obviously I understand why Danica had to die, and that makes sense. And I understand that had to happen, but it also, they would have been a very, very iconic duo.
True.
If she were alive. Because we see a little bit, like, you know, strong female duos throughout her books. We have, the one that comes to mind mostly is Aelin and Lysandra. But even then, it's like, we don't get it a ton. Like, not in the same way. Their relationship is so different to what I understand to be Danica and Bryce's relationship. And I'm like, dang, the chaos that those two would have started if they were together. I was like, I would have loved to have seen that. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, you also have the Valkyrie, but also all of these, I feel like you have a main character. So your main character is Nesta, your main character is Aelin, whatever. And then you kind of have their side characters. But they feel like the first duo that would both be main characters.
Yes.
Which I would have loved to see that as well. I mean, Sarah J Maas, if you want to drop a novella of Bryce and Danica before Crescent City,
or
I would read it.
You know how Marvel has the like what if stories on Disney Plus where they're like, what if Agent Carter would have become, and like, what if I want them to do one of what if Danica never died.
Yeah.
And do a whole fanfic real quick.
Yeah, where is it?
Where is it? Because I would have loved to have honestly seen that. So,
which, by the way, I have a whole theory about who actually killed Danica.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Now I'm curious.
Okay, let me flip to the correct page because I have like 5 pages of notes.
Because I'm pretty sure this was already established.
Yes, but because we established, correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, I will.
Micah killed Danica. However, Micah was influenced by the Asteri, and they pretty much told him that he had to kill Danica.
Oh, that's right.
Correct?
Yes.
But my theory is, I think Hunt is the one who actually killed Danica. Because Hunt, we know, is Micah's personal assassin, right? So saying Micah was told to kill Danica, so he sent Hunt to go do it, right? Then when Bryce stumbles upon the scene, she finds the Crystallos demon, whatever, is helping Micah. Hunt stumbles upon wearing his Umbra Mortis helmet, which 1 establishes he was in the area. 2, we know he only wears his helmet when he's on jobs for Micah. So we know he was on a job for Micah in the area.
Yeah.
And he's the personal assassin, right?
Yeah.
Then we find out the cameras were tampered with, right? During that. When Bryce and Hunt, get a little spicy time in the gym, he goes in and he messes with the cameras. So we already have an established pattern of he can do that. Then there's a line, I believe it's from Crescent City 1, that says, the only word people tend to say when in the presence of the Umbra Mortis is please. And on the audio recording, the only words they were able to get from the recording was Danica saying, please, please. As in she's begging for her life, right? So, I think Micah sent Hunt to kill Danica, but there's a caveat of, do we think he knows, or do we think that he's being controlled by Micah at the time, or by the Asteri? Because there's the theory, right, that a lot of people think the Valg, the Daglin, and the Asteri are all kind of the same people, right?
Yeah.
Throne of Glass spoiler, we know in Throne of Glass we see Dorian be controlled by the Valg with a collar made of wordstone, right? But we see in Crescent City, obviously Luna's horn is in Bryce's back because it was ground to a powder. Do we think that the Valg / Asteri could grind wordstone into a powder so when they tattooed Hunt's brow, it would be the same thing as Dorian wearing the collar, right? And Dorian and Hunt, when Hunt's tattooed again in CC2 at the very end, they describe a similar darkness as to when Dorian's collared at the end of Air of Fire, right? And
oh my gosh, you're blowing my mind.
And in the Oracle, when Hunt's talking to the Oracle, it says, Orion, Hunt, Athalar, be careful of Bryce Quinlan, right? In the story of Orion the Hunter, he was betrayed by his lover and killed, which would be if Bryce found out that Hunt was the one who actually killed Danica. She would not go well, which brings me to another theory.
Keep going. Just keep rolling.
I mean, I'm not sure because obviously House of Flame and Shadow is out, so this would be in the Crescent City after that.
Okay.
That I think Bryce is going to kill Hunt, right? Mostly because if she follows Orion the Hunter logic, his lover kills him, which would be Bryce killing Hunt. But then you ask, but they're mates, and I thought mates can't hurt mates, right? Well, we know in Throne of Glass, as seen with Rowan and Lyra, that mating bonds can be faked, right? Because Maeve makes, and she's Valk, which means she's Asteri in this line of thinking, which that could totally be possible. Also, SJM confirmed that Bryce and Hunt were mates, but added the caveat of, quote, if they both make it to the end. What do you mean if they both make it to the end? Then, when she asked if the mating bonds in Crescent City and ACOTAR were the same, she said, quote, I'm gonna pass. So, like, the mates can't hurt mates logic may not even be applicable in this case. And a lot of people I've heard have referred to Hunt and Bryce's, like, mating bond as, like, an angel mating bond, which is more similar to marriage than it is to, like, a mates type situation.
Yeah.
And it would make sense because the Asteri give their blessing to Hunt and Bryce about their mating, which why would they do that? Yeah, unless Hunt was being controlled by the Asteri and they want to rein Bryce in because she's one of the most she's more powerful than the Autumn King. So why it would be perfect for them.
And she has the power of the sword and the horn that she can get to worlds. Okay, wait. Hold on.
Let's unpack that for a second.
Wow. My brain. Because I thought that... Okay, and this is where I feel like Sarah J Maas struggled with CC, is I feel like there were empty plot holes, or she didn't fully explain what actually happened in many circumstances. Not just with Danica's death, but with many things. I don't know if that was intentional or what, but I thought that Danica ripped herself to shreds. I thought that's what happened.
Yes, I think that is what they said, but in this case, it would be Hunt would have been the one to inject her with the sin.
Yes. So in this moment, I was like, I'm gonna null and void your thing, but then you just kept going, and then I was like, holy frick, wait. So my very first thought was, I was like, what if it's not his tattoo, but what if it's... My first thought when you were like, what if he's being controlled? I was like, oh, his helmet. Like his helmet, like when he puts it on, like is like a word, like is made out of wordstone or something like that.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, he wears it on all the jobs.
Yeah, he wears it on all the jobs, but he also doesn't. He stops wearing it after CC1 when he's free. Anyways, so that was my thought one. But the tattoo makes way more sense.
But also, the tattoo has a lot of what ifs attached to it.
They say in the book, they're like the tattoo is made out of witch ink. Is what they said, but they never explain what it is. And so I feel like it being called, like, it has a specific name to the ink that it's made out of, that I'm like, very high possibility, because that makes sense to me. Like the tattoo would be made out of essentially wordstone and be able to be controlled.
Yeah, and it would. Oh my gosh, my brain's melting trying to assemble all my thoughts here. What was I going to say?
But I had more.
Oh, continue.
But also, because I understand, okay, she confirmed that Bryce and Hunt were mates, whatever. However, I have not for 1 second believed it in my entire life.
Facts.
So I literally, here's the thing, is that, okay, fine. They chose to be mates, and that made it so that you could smell it on them or whatever. But I kid you not, even after them telling me in CC2 that they could smell it on them, I still didn't believe it. And at that point, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe they chose to be mates, but that to me does not mean that they were fated to be together, like how the ACOTAR mates are, where it like almost is like the cauldron chooses your mate.
Yeah.
And I get like, and I don't think that it was necessarily like used in that like that type of thinking wasn't used in the mating bonds in Crescent City. It wasn't like, oh, Erd chose this mating bond. Like it isn't like that. But truly, I'm like, okay, maybe they chose to be mates, but wouldn't that also mean that they have a fated mate as well?
I hope so. And a lot of people support this theory that, from what I could tell, that are Asriel and Bryce shippers.
Oh, yes.
Because they're like, no, Asriel and Bryce were meant to be, which would make sense because Hunt would die or Hunt would be out of the picture and they wouldn't be fated to be together. They chose to be together, but maybe she's fated for somebody else.
Freaking Asriel, because this man could be with literally absolutely everyone.
Anyone.
But I believed for a very, very long time. Now I'm not as confident, but I believed for a really long time that Asriel and Bryce were supposed to be mates because they are two halves of the Dusk Court. And so I thought that they were going to like rule the Dusk Court together from like their respective worlds.
Living for that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, the thing is that gets me is, and again, we'll talk about it more in House of Flame and Shadow, but it did kind of seem like Bryce and Hunt's story was kind of wrapped up. So I don't know.
I think it's really funny because I was browsing a bunch of people's comments on TikToks about Hunt's and Bryce's relationship in general, and I think it's a general consensus that nobody really cares for it. Everybody says they were getting bad vibes from it the entire time. Something about it was not clicking and feeling right.
Yeah.
Which would just solidify this theory. And then I was trying to think of loopholes. And one thing that came to mind was when Bryce makes the drop, she speaks to Danica.
Yeah.
And it's like, Danica should know who killed her. And if it were Hunt, why wouldn't she say something to Bryce right then? But then thinking about it, I don't think she would have completed the drop if she found out that Hunt had killed Danica.
Yeah.
I think she would have just died.
Well, I mean,
she wouldn't want to return.
Though, and during the drop does encourage her, being like, there's an angel waiting for you, like, go to him. Like, Danica encourages Bryce to go to Hunt. And I think that if that's the case, then I am sure, that makes me confident that Danica would have known about Hunt being able to be controlled and didn't hold that against him. Which means that Danica, again, knows something
and
that didn't tell him.
Which is true, because I was trying to think, the reason I went into the line of thinking of he had to be controlled is because if this is the case, I don't think he can know that he killed Danica. I think it would have to be a reveal that he found out later in the books, being like, oh my gosh, because if he's being controlled similar to a Dorian situation, Dorian didn't really remember a ton, but then once he got the collar off, I think he would explain he'd get flashes of what he did.
Yeah.
When somebody was pretty much possessing him.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that at a later date in time, he would get like these flashes and be like, oh my gosh, I killed my mate's best friend.
Yes. At the same time, though, I'm like, can we, because I know she's going to write more Crescent City books, but at this point, I'm like, maybe it's time to put it to rest as well. Like, at the same time,
I know.
Let the Pack of Devils and all of that go. Because, also, I do love how CC1 ends where she, like, texts, because she, like, had the text on her phone from forever of Connor texting her, being like, text me when you get home. And the very end of the book, she texts back, I'm home. I'm like, that is the most perfect, beautiful writing. And I'm like, can't we just let the Pack of Devils leave? Like, lie to rest.
They are the most, like, present dead people in a series. They died within the first 25 pages of Crescent City 1, and we're still talking about them in Crescent City 3.
Exactly. But I'm just like, there's a part, I feel like there gets to a point, though, when you have plot points like Danica, where you're just like, let it go at this point. Yeah, like, let's come up with something else. So if she does come back in, like, a 4th Crescent City book, and she's like, oh, more things that Danica didn't tell us, it was like, I'm gonna be like, really? You couldn't come up with anything else? Oh. But that's an interesting thought, though.
Also, random side note, another thing that I cannot decipher from my handwriting because it's so awful. There is a part, too, when Bryce is in the bone quarter where she's just, like, questioning the mating bond. And she's like, wouldn't a mate be able to feel or, like, know what their mate is doing?
Yes!
And you're like, I feel like they would. And even herself, she's like, I feel like it's not right. Because I
could see, because I know that part of her, like, has a really hard time, like, accepting, like, a male being in her life. So I think that, like, that there's a part of me that's like, maybe that's why. But literally, this is why I didn't believe it, is because Bryce wasn't confident in it.
No.
If Bryce would have been confident in it, then I probably would have been like, yeah, okay. Or there would have been like a moment where they were like, I am yours and you are mine and whatever. But like with them, it felt like she was doubting it. Like even when Nesta and Cassian like kind of established that they're mates, Nesta is like, no. But I knew in that moment that she wasn't saying no because she didn't believe it. She was saying no because she's Nesta and she's stubborn, and that's exactly something that Nesta would do. Whereas with Bryce, I was like, I just feel like when she was like, oh, I don't know, kind of. And then also, sorry, this is in CC2, but when they're like, oh, like, what should we be? They're like, boyfriend and girlfriend doesn't sound like enough. Hunt's like, what about mates? And in her inner monologue, she's like, oh, like, that's, like, a serious thing. Like, she's like, do you realize what that is? And he's like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, of course he knows what that is. He's, like, 300 years old. Of course he knows what a mate is.
Yeah, and I know she established that the mating bonds aren't the same, but in ACOTAR and in Throne of Glass, the mating bond is, like, something that snaps into place, and then from there, you either accept or reject it. This was like a casual agreement being like, oh yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, then all of a sudden they smelt like they were mates. And I'm like, I'm so confused right now. It's not even funny.
There wasn't like a snap or anything.
No, and even like, and again, like even with like Lydia and Rune too, which I'm going to have to go back to kind of look at like how their mating bond comes up to fruition exactly. But for them, I'm like, oh yeah. That made 110% amount of sense. I was like, never doubted it for a second. And I'm like, so what is it? I have never, ever doubted any of the mating bonds that she has written about except for Hunt and Bryce. Why?
Yeah, the vibes are just not there, which is a terrible reasoning, but like, vibes are bad.
So bad. Anyways, okay. I feel like I have so many just like one-off thoughts from CSE1.
Let's hear it.
One thing that I thought was weird is the necklace that Bryce has that like blocks their magic or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Archesian necklace.
Totally.
It's 3 knots forming a triangle, and it sounds very similar to Archeron.
I can't even picture that in my head, but I got you.
A knot, and a little triangle.
Okay.
Anyways, it's called the Archesian necklace. Sounds very similar to Archeron in the fact that there's 3 knots.
Yeah, 3 sisters.
Yeah, 3 sisters. Again, not a single clue what that means. I just think that like the similarities to that was interesting. Okay, this is the other thing was in Crescent City 1 when Bryce is trying to figure out the password to Danica's like laptop. She's like, oh, Defendir. And she's like, oh, it sounds like Defender. And I was like, what's the definition of Fendir? Like, what is it? And then I was like looking up the definition of Fendir, and I was like, what is the definition? Fendir comes from the from North mythology, the a wolf in North mythology called Fenrir, which is also referred to as Fenris.
As soon as you said Fenrir, I said, that sounds like somebody I know.
Fenris wolf. And this made me think, I don't know for sure, because I had also thought that maybe Ethan and Connor were descendants of Fenris and like his bloodline.
Yeah.
But also the wolves at the same time. Fenris was a wolf in Throne of Glass. And so I was like, oh, maybe the entire like wolf line from Crescent City is descendants from Fenris. But I think that the Fendir line are direct descendants from Fenris.
That would make sense, because correct me if I'm wrong too. We established at some point in time that the shifters were originally are part Fae.
Yes, they're part Fae. They're from Throne of Glass's world.
Yes, and then for some reason in this world they just don't have access
because of the parasite.
Yes. Thank you for making my thoughts come to fruition.
I got you. Don't even worry.
And so that would make sense, right?
Yes, because so it was insinuated, especially after House of Flame and Shadow, that all of the shifters, all of them, come from the Throne of Glass world, and that's why like Lydia is a descendant of Aelin and things like that. And so I've been thinking of like, okay, who's a descendant of who? Yeah. And it was really interesting seeing that Fenris's name was so similar to Fenrir, and they kind of fall within the same line of like Fenris, wolf in this Norse mythology. And I was like, they have to be direct descendants like that. But also, they were talking in CC1, and she makes a comment about how the wolves, the hawks, the lions, I can't remember, but she names off the like main like predators that are like over like that are like protectors of Midgard and things like that. She named every single one of them that all of the men from the Cabell, however you say it, all of Maeve's like cadre, sorry, I'm Cabell. Like, I was like, that cadre. She names every single animal that the men are from the cadre, and that's who all of the like protectors are of Midgard. The like head protectors. I can't remember.
What's Gavriel?
Gavriel is a lion. But Gavriel, so Gavriel was a lion, so that would be like Adian and stuff. Yeah. And then a hawk, which is Rowan, and then Fenris is the wolves, and then I can't remember what the other one was. I think they also said leopard, which I was like, oh, maybe Lysandra. But anyways, besides the point, I was like, oh, our little cadre making a comeback, making an appearance. Anyways, that was a very interesting line of thought. But there was another thing I had.
You go.
Sorry, this is such a unrelated topic, but I am so confused about the Autumn King.
Low-key facts, because why do I get it so mixed up with ACOTAR all the time too?
That's so true.
Because why did she name them the same?
And they're so similar. Him and Baron are so similar.
So similar. And for a second, I'm not going to lie, I thought there might be a redemption arc of sorts with the Autumn King. I didn't think he was going to be completely bad. This
is where I'm so confused. And maybe she did this intentionally because she didn't know where his character was going to go. But in CC1, we obviously see that the Autumn King is like kind of like the villain. Like he's not a good guy. But then also like when she's going through the drop and things like that, he like kind of like shows moments of like him caring.
Yeah.
You know? And so it started to feel like maybe it was hinting at him potentially being good. And then it just goes so far off from that in the rest of the books. Like he becomes like so bad and awful. And it felt like maybe she didn't know where his character was going to go. But I just was so confused because I felt like CC1 was setting up for him to be kind of more of like an Eris situation of being like, I am trying to protect you. Stop fighting me on this. And like it all coming out later.
Yeah, or I'll be the bad guy in your narrative for the sake of that helps you.
Exactly.
But I have my reasons.
Yeah, exactly. No. And then it was just like, he's literally just the scum of the earth. And I was like, wow, we were doing a lot of setup for no reason at that point then.
Yeah.
I didn't understand.
I had this, I didn't even write this down. This just came to mind. Barely too. Is something that I feel like, I don't even know how to explain it, but at least in CC2. But we find out when she makes the drop, she goes further than anybody recorded has gone. She's more powerful than the Autumn King, whatever. So we establish in words, like verbally, we're like, she is so powerful. She's so powerful. But what can she do? What does she do? What does her power do besides blind people?
This is literally one of my biggest pet peeves is that she never, ever fully explained what Bryce's powers were. No, in Starlight. And you're like, okay, she's learning how to winnow in the second book.
Yeah.
But then it's also established that she can't do it without being charged up by Hunt's lightning. Yeah. And so, yeah, we literally, and not even in the final battle of House and Flame and Shadow do we even see her full power. I'm so confused.
And in the end of CC1, we obviously see her kill Micah with the God Slinger, whatever rifle thing, which, I mean, yes, I think it's poetic because her dad's Randall and things like that, but she had made the drop at that point and never used her Starborn power.
No. She hadn't made the drop. She kills Micah first, and then the gates are open. So then she goes. Right. Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense.
And she was trying to hide. She's been trying to hide her Starlight, which I know at the end of CC1, they're all like, "Oh, you're all so strong and powerful," and she's like, "My power is truly nothing. It's literally just light."
And the Asteri are almost afraid of her, right?
Yes. But
like they want to keep her on a leash because she's so powerful, and I mean she's the horn and everything.
Yeah,
too,
and I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I can't remember off the top of my head. I could be wrong. I think it's her starlight that is able to kill them.
Literally no idea.
Put a pin in that one. I'm gonna have to reread House of Flame and Shadow and come back to you on that one. Circle back on that one. I can't remember. Episode. I bet there's people like screaming, like being like yes or no, like idiots or something.
Yeah, leave it in the comments because I'm sure we've been wrong here and there.
But anyways, I just think that it was so weird. Like it was like the magic system as a whole in this book is extremely inconsistent.
Like, what I've understood is the Starborn power is needed to use the horn, right?
Yes.
So that's like the main thing that's so incredible about being Starborn.
Yes.
Is you can use the horn and now you can become a world walker of sorts.
Well, that was what for her in that instance. But to be a Starborn Fae just meant that you were like that's what like Rune was like heir to the Starborn Fae. It was very like prestigious to be chosen by the Star Sword. Like to be a Starborn Fae was like the greatest honor and
but why?
Thing.
What can you do?
Nothing. You literally can't do anything. It's literally a ball of light.
Yeah, I'm like it's really cool. I mean, it can blind an oracle. I guess we know that.
I don't understand it either. Okay, we are still on CC1.
Golly.
I just had a couple more random thoughts. There was a line when Ember is talking to Bryce and she tells Bryce that she's like Jessica would never sacrifice anything over or for the sake of Bryce or something like that. Like she makes a comment how she's like Jessica would sacrifice nothing for Bryce, and I'm like, well, the foreshadowing. Yeah. The foreshadowing in that moment.
Ember, you clearly have not made it to CC3.
No, obviously not. So there was that one. And then, okay, so a lot of people talk about the similarities between Fury and Amryn.
Yes.
And a lot of people think that they are like the same creature or like from the same
because they don't ever say what Fury is.
No, they never do. The only thing that they've ever said is that they think that she's from House of Flame and Shadow, but that's like basically it.
And I think Danica knew what she was, right?
I
think there was some sort of line where they exchange some sort of dialogue, and it's like we both knew we were creatures of nightmares or something
like that. I don't know, but so it's insinuated that Amryn and Fury are the same creature, but I would take it one step further and say that I don't think that they just were the same creature. I think they knew each other. I think that Fury is over 15,000 years old. Because in ACOTAR, Amryn, like there's only one time that Amryn talks to Feyre about like what she is or where she came from, and she says, literally quote, I wrote it down. Amryn says that she was a messenger, a soldier assassin for a wrathful god who ruled a young world. And she's like, I was a soldier assassin, which is literally who Fury is.
She's an assassin, yes.
Yes, and for like the government, essentially. And we also learned that like when Fury was at CCU or whatever the school was called, and where she met like Bryce and Danica and stuff like that, she was there undercover. She's not their age. It's never been confirmed that she's actually their age. And so I was like, I feel like that, and we also just know nothing about Fury, and same with Amryn, know nothing.
Nothing.
Literally nothing. And the only other time that Fury in CC1 like tells Bryce, she's like, I understand what it's like to lose people. Like, I understand what you're going through. Like, when she's talking to Bryce about Danica, I'm like, I need to know more.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's just I'm going to need a reunion of Fury and Amryn or something like that, because there's just no way that they don't know each other.
That'd be so interesting, because also, I'm not sure if this is even connected, but when Bryce falls into Prythian, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the book, Amryn's the one that visibly reacts and is like, after she speaks, and everybody's like, why is Amryn's never made that sound before?
Yes.
And it would make even more sense because she's saying, oh, nobody's spoken that language in forever or whatever.
Yeah.
If it was maybe a place where she had originally been from, or somebody that she knew was from there.
Yeah, exactly. And there was another part too, because they don't know what Fury is like, what house she's from. And also it was like, but in CC1 when they are at their like meeting or whatever, Hunt is describing like where everyone is sitting. So it's like in the center, you know, the heads of all of the like houses or whatever are sitting in there.
Yeah.
And then their seconds are behind them in the second ring. And then there's like a third ring and it kind of goes up from there. And she says that Jessica was there representing House of Flame and Shadow. She was there by herself, but then Fury was sitting in the third ring above her. And so it makes me think that Fury and Jessica know each other, but I don't think they just know each other because of House of Flame and Shadow. I think they know each other because they have literally been together for 15,000 years.
That would be crazy.
I know it would be crazy, but I just feel like there's not enough. We don't know enough about Fury. She basically sits on the sidelines for basically the entire book series.
Yeah, it's like, I'll do anything to save Juniper, and besides that, count me freaking out.
Yeah, exactly. So that was another one that I thought was super interesting. And then this is also something that's super random. Reese and the Autumn King have the same like globe world thing, gold thing in their offices. They have the same exact like I don't know what it is, but it was like a diagram of like worlds, and they both have it in their office. It's really random. And then the last one I had was there's a line in A Court of Silver Flames where they talk about when they find the Dread Trove that the Dread Trove, when you have those items, they don't want to be found until they let you, essentially. And made objects don't wish to be found by just anyone is what they say. And correct me if I'm wrong. We established that the horn is like the fourth Dread Trove, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
So that means that the horn didn't want to be found or like recognized as like something that was like of importance until Danica. So that makes me think that like all of it was like supposed to happen. Like Danica was supposed to find the horn, and it wouldn't have happened if the Dread Trove didn't want to get found or like basically like come together.
Oh no, is this gonna be like a Nehemia situation where it's like Danica's death had to come to pass to like make everything?
Well, I mean, definitely, but I thought that was really interesting where it's like that still correlates with like the horn in the sense of like it didn't want to get found until the right time. But it's just interesting to me that like why now is the Dread Trove all coming together or being found? Like what the frick is the villain gonna be in the next ACOTAR books and things like that?
What gets worse?
Yeah, like what is worse? So anyways, that's all my thoughts on CC1 though. I'm all done.
My last thought for CC1 was just the very end. It was my favorite part of the whole book was when everybody was at the summit and Bryce was fighting Micah.
It's so good.
So good. But I almost lost my shiz when she jumps into the tank, the knock tank after Syrinx or whatever. It felt very Kale jumping into the portal after Fleetfoot coded. I'm like, why can we not leave these animals alone? Like, yes, loving animals makes you a really good human being, but at the same time, you might die. So why do we keep going in after these animals?
That's so freaking true. It is very much like Kale going after Fleetfoot.
Yeah. I'm like, and also in that whole scene, she opens a book and it pushes Micah backwards, whatever, and he's like regaining his footing or whatever because he flew away. In that period, she jumps into the knock tank. There's like a brief little tangent over here, almost dies, comes out, and then Micah's like, oh, I've conveniently just barely gained my footing.
No, this time that I was listening to that whole sequence, I was like, that was a very odd, like, her and Micah, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, redirect attention to here just real quick to do this one thing. And I'm like, I felt like that wasn't very necessary at that moment.
Yeah.
It truly wasn't necessary.
It was just like the cherry on top. And then Lahaba's death, I don't know how I feel about it because I don't feel like it was that necessary.
It's
However,
just meant to be sad, I think.
It did make me tear up a little bit. So I think she did a great job writing it and making me feel for Lahaba. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't think she needed to die. And the fact that she was like, oh, I bought your freedom, Lahaba, you're free. And she's like, let my first act of freedom be protecting my friends or something. okay, fine, bars, make me cry a little bit, but
Yeah, no, okay, also, if you listen to the audio of that part too, she does such a good job doing La Habba's voice and, like, that whole sequence that I didn't tear up, when I read it, but listening to the audio made me teary-eyed. I was like, dang, okay.
Yeah, and I wish, too, with the ending, obviously, how I said before, she kills Micah with the Godslayer rifle.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we would have gotten a little more of that, because in this book, I think they do a really good job emphasizing how intelligent Bryce is. She's always thinking several steps ahead.
Mm-hmm.
She's formulating these plans, not letting a lot of people know. But we don't get a lot of, like, her physical fighting abilities.
Yeah.
Especially because we talk about how she's raised by Randall.
Yeah.
Has that one scene where they go shooting.
Oh, it's the most iconic scene
and
ever.
she shoots the bullet hole through the other bullet hole, so it
Yeah.
looks like one. I'm like, yes, look at how competent she is. Does she ever use a gun ever again? No. I'm like, she's like a physical threat.
Outside of her mind, we truly don't see her capabilities as far as literally magic, her gun, like being able to use guns, like literally, like none of it. I don't even know if she can actually physically fight.
I know.
I literally have not a single clue.
I feel like we're told, like, oh, she's so strong, she can do these things, she has all this magic,
Yes.
but then we never see her do that.
No.
I mean, at the end of CC1, when she's running around, she's in great shape because she's running around.
And killing people with a sword and a gun, one sword in one hand, gun in the other, and I'm like, where did that come from?
Yeah, but, like, even that, I wish we would have gotten more.
Yes.
Because it felt like very side note.
Yes.
And it feels like a lot of the time the physical fighting relies on Hunt and Rune and...
Yeah.
But they're telling me she's competent, but they're not letting me see it.
Yes.
And I want to.
I totally agree. I do think that was like one of my tips about Bryce's characters. I feel like a lot of the things that made her Bryce were things that we were told, not what we were showed.
Yeah.
But I love the scene of them at the gun range or whatever, and her shooting those bullet holes. That is like one of my favorite scenes.
Yes.
Ever. And then also, you will not tell me that there's not a more iconic scene in literature when she freaking vacuums up Micah. That is the most unhinged.
I literally have a note in here that I'm like, oh my gosh, vacuuming up Micah. Because before I said I'm not a huge fan of modern fantasy. I stand by that. But that was almost like a satirical twist on it, where she literally lights him on fire and then vacuums him up while everybody's watching. And in my head, I'm like, okay, if this whole book was modern fantasy like that, with like a hint of satire comedy mixed into it,
Yeah.
I eat that up.
See, but this is what I was trying to say, was that Sarah J Maas like took the fact that she was going to have this modern fantasy and used it to her advantage in every single way. I think she did a really good job of that, being like, I'm in a modern fantasy world. What could I do with that? What's different? And I'm like, vacuuming his ashes up? Sure. Fantastic.
Iconic.
And I'm like, the mind that you have to come up with that, because what in the world made her think, oh yeah, she's gonna light him on fire, grab the vacuum, and just to make him go away. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
No,
The most unhinged thing I've ever read.
that was incredible. It gave me, I don't know, have you ever seen The Boys?
Mm-mm.
Do you know what it is?
No.
It's a TV show that's almost like not like a parody, but like a satirical commentary on superheroes.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it's pretty much superheroes are supposed to be money makers. And so they put them through all this propaganda and marketing, and they don't actually save anybody. They do all like commercial. It's just like very satire.
Yeah.
And the vacuuming Micah up, I'm like, that is so The Boys coded. I wish I would have gotten more.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I was like, that is the most absurd thing I've ever read, but I loved it.
I did. I thought it was a great way to end it. I was like,
So
yes.
good. Okay, any other thoughts about CC1?
No, my thoughts from here, they're going downhill.
Oh gosh. Well, okay. My first thought is CC2 is not a good book until the last 50 pages, minus the day and night chapters.
Low-key facts, and you want to hear something that's terrible?
What?
I got CC2. I'm not a huge hard copy reader, but I got it. I wanted to read it, so I read it hard copy. I was going through it. I got so mother freaking bored that I set it down with about 60 pages left in the book and didn't pick it up for about a month and a half until I saw something on TikTok about a crossover, and I was like, I didn't read anything about a crossover. Then picked up the last 60 pages and was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, got it. But literally, Kate, first off, this entire book is like one of the main plot points it's revolving around is finding the freaking Emil boy, whatever the frick his name is, basically becomes null and void, pointless, and it gets them nowhere.
The Thunderbird plotline is not it.
This is where all the plot holes start to come to fruition because, and I thought that a lot of these plot holes would be resolved in CC3, but so many of them didn't. The Thunderbirds made absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
Literally never came to fruition at all.
I mean, the more I thought about this, the more I realized I have no idea what's going on. Did we decide that Thunt? I just combined Thunderbird and Hunt. Thunt, whatever. Hunt is a Thunderbird or Thunderbird adjacent? Because he was
a test tube baby. He was born by the princes of hell.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that.
Yes, yeah. That's in CC3 that we discover that. But yeah, so essentially test tube baby.
So truly the Thunderbirds are irrelevant.
Literally, we're basically irrelevant.
Wow, I'm so glad I read a really boring book about.
Yeah. So that was the first crime of CC2 was this freaking Emil plotline that literally became zero relevance in CC2 or in CC3.
Yeah.
It was giving Fleetfoot of like, you brought in this character and now you have to find something to do with them. That's what it was giving.
Well, then in House of Flame and Shadow, she obviously pushes Ember and Randall into Prithian and leaves Emil Cooper behind and was like, we just had a whole book about saving him.
I'm like, you got to figure out what to do with this kid now, and he doesn't even do anything to the actual plot.
I know, and we read a whole book dedicated to him.
Yes.
To turn around and be like, I don't give a flying flip about this guy. Abandonment? Fine.
Yeah, literally, I cannot handle. Anyways, so that was first crime number 1, except for the only good thing that came out of this book was Day and Night, because that is probably one of the best romances she has ever written, and I will die on that hill.
Love Day and Night. I will say, when they had mind sex, it felt very a court of Frost and Starlight coded, like Sex in the Sky, where I'm like, I don't know if this was necessary because they had already established like an intimate emotional bond through talking to each other. I'm like, we can wait. I didn't need that.
But again, this comes back to mating bonds and things like that, because from the beginning, they obviously have this like very natural pull to each other, and it is very, very obvious to me. And so them doing that, I'm like, wow, they literally could not restrain themselves, and that makes me believe that they were mates.
Yeah.
Hunt and Bryce, I didn't have that same feeling. Anyways, but the whole Rune and Lydia plot point starts in this book, and it's really good, and then CC3, it literally carries CC3 on its back. But
yeah, I was gonna say, I think she does a great job in CC3, but also in CC3, briefly, just to add on to another point here, who shoots who? Rune shoots Lydia.
Yes.
So that just goes to say that the mates can't hurt mates thing is for sure just not a thing in this world.
Yeah, that's null and void for in this world.
Okay, yeah, just was thinking about that. The fact I had to remember.
I had to think that through for a second.
Yes.
Anyway, so I absolutely love them. I think Lydia's character is one of the best characters she has also written. She's definitely like top 3 female characters for me.
Oh, yeah.
I just think that it's literally probably Aelin, her, and Nesta are probably my top 3 favorite female characters. I love Nesta.
Interesting.
But anyways, so yeah, I definitely loved that part of the book, and that's probably the only thing that made it like relatively bearable. Do you have any other do you have some thoughts before I go on?
Random things.
Okay, go.
Another crime number 2 after the whole Thunderbirds, but they're actually a relevant plot line, is the sex pact plot line at the beginning of this book.
Oh,
we are not going to be intimate until winter solstice, which is 4.5 months away.
They never even get there.
No, they make it such a big deal. And then even when, I'm going to get this so wrong because I think at the beginning, after Ethan had helped Bryce at the end of CC1,
Yeah.
Sabine and Amelia,
Yeah.
whatever, beat him up, and then she finds him broken and bleeding on her table,
Yeah.
whatever. Literally, she opts to sleep in a bed with Ethan rather than Hunt because she's like, I have no self-control. I'm like, this doesn't even make any sense anymore.
No.
Why are we doing this?
This is just like so many parts of this book. I was just like, that literally makes no sense. Why? Like, and that was one of them. Was why? Like, there were just so many.
Make it.
No, they don't make it. So why? I don't understand.
Yeah, what was the purpose of that whole thing?
And because of it, literally because of it, when they do finally decide to have sex, that's their moment of like, that's like the first time they tell each other that I love you, and I hate when couples do that. I hate when it's like in the most like sexual moment where they're like, I love you. I'm like, you're horny.
Yeah,
that doesn't make me think you love them. That just makes me think you're horny as frick.
That's so facts. When the first time they say I love you is like when they're being intimate, and you're like, could you not have waited or like said it before?
Exactly. Like, be a little bit more emotional. At least, I don't know. I literally could not handle. I was like, hate that part.
I didn't think it contributed to the plot at all. I, in fact, think it made the plot just like a little bit more unbearable than it was originally.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me like the relationship even less than I did. Because I would say at the end of CC1 is probably when I liked their relationship the most.
Same.
And downhill ever since.
Yes.
So, very odd that she made that creative choice.
Yes. Like I said, like I told you, I was like, in the beginning, we had like Hunt and Bryce were like up here, and then they slowly decline, and then we get introduced to Rune and Lydia, and they're like, you know, down here, and they end up rising above so high. They just like end up crossing. As Hunt and Bryce go down, Rune and Lydia just rise to the top.
Oh, so facts. And crime number 3, well, this can be crime number 2A. Or something like that. It's just the amount of names that sound the same in the book, same in this book. The S names. Let's have a quiz really fast.
Oh no.
What's the name of the very bad archangel that Hunt had to serve?
Why did I just about say cereal? That's not right.
So I'm saying they all sound like cereal.
Sandriel.
Sure. I don't even know if that's correct.
It's Sandriel.
And then what's the name of the one that he fell in love with? Before Shahara. So we have Sandriel, we have Shahara. What's the name of the new one?
Of the new one?
The new archangel that takes Micah's place? Celestina. So now we have Sahar, Sandriel, Celestina.
We have Sabine.
With the name of the other Fendir heir in House of Flame and Shadow.
Already forgot.
Sabir Hira. Oh shoot, what is it? Sabir? Whatever. It's another S name that's just out there. What's the name of Tharion's wife?
I don't even remember.
It's another S name that I don't know. The whole time, every time I read one of those names, I would have to do a mental gymnastics to figure out who the frick I was talking about. Because they all sound like variations of the same name.
Also, there's so many names that cross over, like Ethan. Every time I read his name, it's Ianthe, because they are literally the same exact name, just one letter moved.
It's just the E.
It's
right?
Ianthe, you spell I-A-T-H-N-E. Sorry.
Spelling is not our strong suit, as you can tell.
I-A-N-T-H-E, and you spell Ethan I-T-H-A-N-E. Like, it's literally like 2 letters, but it's the same exact letters, and I'm like, I can't do the same exact letters in a name.
Yeah, why are we spelling Ethan with an I?
I don't know.
Because I think, is it supposed to be pronounced Ethan?
I thought that, and then everyone on TikTok was telling me Ethan, and that's how they say it in the audiobook.
Yeah, anyways, the amount, and then she also has the freaking, what do you call that? Not asymmetrical, that's so wrong. Alliteration circus with the harpy, the hound, the
hellhound, the hind.
The hind, the harpy, the hound, the hollow, I don't know. There's too many H names.
Well, also she has the hellhound, but then you also have the bloodhounds that are things that can smell blood. It's so freaking confusing. I literally cannot handle.
I couldn't. Every time I know the hind, and I knew the harpy was somebody else.
Yes, the hammer is the other one.
Everybody else who wasn't the hind was just like people in the white noise in the background.
Are they literally all supposed to be H names?
I think they are all H names.
The hellhound, the hind, the harpy,
the hammer. Is Pollux the hammer?
Yeah. Oh, I never caught on to
there's
that.
one more. It's another H name. Surprise. Can't do it.
Love. Also, okay, side note, because we were talking about Ethan, he is unbearable in CC3, but I really, really liked him in CC2. Unpopular opinion. I was so excited for his character. It went downhill extremely fast in CC3, which we will get to next week, but for now, I really liked his character in CC2.
I will counter with, I liked his character, but I hated his plot line. The astronomer plot line?
Where did it come from? Again, why?
Why are we doing this? Because
I don't understand!
We know in CC3, obviously the Fendir Air plot line really goes nowhere.
It literally doesn't matter.
So why we have the whole astronomer that leads into the Fendir Air that actually does nothing?
And the dragon. We get the freaking dragon and Darna or whatever the...
And Darna? We're in Fourth Wing now? But
it's
Drea...
and
Anoraxia? No, that's a sword. Shoot!
Anyways, again, the astronomer whole thingy McBobber. Again, why? Just why? I don't understand.
I just feel like something I compared this book to, and people are going to yell at me for this. So much was happening, but yet nothing was happening at all.
Oh, exactly.
Which reminded me of From Blood and Ash. That's the definition of that book. I read it. I read all 500 and some odd pages. I closed the book and I said, I can name one plot point from the very beginning and the very end. The in between 450 pages, nothing.
I literally cannot. Yeah. And the other part too was like Cormac. We get Cormac. Why? Sophie. Why? The rebels. Why? I like literally half of this book. I'm just like, why?
Also, now that I think about it, something that's really random is we get the Medi Witch, which we find out is Hypaxia.
Oh yeah.
Right? But we get Hypaxia flirting with Rune, right? But Medi Witch, Hypaxia, flirting with Rune because they're engaged.
Oh yeah. Well, that's in CC1. Then she was never flirting with Rune. She just was helping Rune.
But he was getting vibes.
True. But then she starts flirting with Therian in the second book.
Stop.
Her and Therian are like besties. But then it comes out that she's with Celestina.
I almost said synesthesia. I think that's when you can smell colors or something like that. Synesthesia? Celestina. Yeah, roller coaster there. As you can tell, the minute we entered CC2, we just got so unhinged because I don't know what the flip is going on in this book. Then we have Pippa is like the other major plot line, right?
Rebels.
I have no thoughts on that besides the mech suits. That was like the big point.
Yes. Which, again, Cormac dies essentially to blow up all the mech suits, right?
Yes.
The mech suits still exist in CC3. So, was there a point to it? Absolutely not.
Yeah, number of deaths that haven't meant anything so far. Cormac and Lahaba, both unnecessary.
So unnecessary, all of them. Anyways, I literally cannot with this book. Some other thoughts. Sorry, I had to my heart is racing.
Yeah, we were just a hot mess there for a second. We're back.
Here's a theory, okay? Is Rune's mom. I'm so excited to finally talk about this because I have been waiting this entire series of SJM to talk about Rune's mom. So we get absolutely nothing about his mom. We only get the littlest bit. We get the littlest bit of his mom. And obviously when Bryce gets brought to Prithian at the end of the book, she's like, wow, this man, whoever he is, it's Reese, looks like Rune. And he that. To the point of she's like, wait, is that Rune? And then she's like, oh wait, no.
Yeah.
But so my theory, and I'm so excited to finally piece this together, is that Rune's mom is his sister. and that she lived.
I've
And
heard
the
this.
reason why the way that she lived was that she was Tamlin's mate, and Tamlin saved her through the Starlight pool in the Spring Court, and it transferred her to another world, and that's where she ended up, was in CC, and yeah, and that's how Rune was born, was because
That would make sense.
yeah, and that's how, and so she's still alive.
Rune has darkness-ish powers.
Yes, he has shadow powers, but he also is the Demate, but
Yes.
it's extremely, extremely rare.
Yeah, which matches Reese, which would make
Yes.
perfect sense. And I don't think we talk about enough in ACOTAR that Tamlin and Feyre were together, but never, like, a mating bond was never brought into
and
question.
I told this before, was my theory was that Tamlin and her were mates. Actually, okay, originally I thought that Asriel and his sister were mates, and then I decided that her and Tamlin were being mates made more sense. And I think that was the reason why Tamlin was okay marrying Feyre without the mating bond, because he already knew he had a mate and that she was gone.
Yeah.
And I think that it would make sense too, like later in the story, to keep the Crescent City stories interconnected with the ACOTAR, for Tamlin to finally come out and be like, your sister's alive, and I did my best, stop hating me, or something like that. Like, and that be part of his healing journey, is finding her.
Because I don't know if Tamlin's actually capable of a redemption arc if it's true that he murdered Reese's sister.
No, I
That's
don't
something
think
that
so,
I'm
too.
not sure if you can come back from. But if he comes
No.
back and he said, hey, I didn't actually do that,
Yeah,
she's safe, but she's now in Midgard or
yeah,
whatever
he
she is
probably
now.
doesn't even know where she is.
Yeah.
But I just think, because this is the other thing too, is that we see that the Autumn King is obviously Rune's dad, but Rune looks nothing like him, and he doesn't have the fire magic that the Autumn King does. 'Cause
Why
the
have
Autumn
I
King
never
has
put that
fire.
together?
So obviously like his shadow magic and his Demate magic
Yeah.
came from someone else, and they talk about how the Avalon Fae, that like where Cormac comes from, are
Yes.
more of like the shadow people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like that's where Rune's magic came from. It would make more sense that that his magic came from his mom.
Yes.
Anyways, so that
And-
was
I think Sarah J Maas is really intentional, especially with the word Starlight, especially if she had Crescent City brewing in the back of her mind and the center of it was the 8-pointed star and Starlight.
yeah.
So I think when she has the Starlight pool in ACOTAR, that can't be a coincidence.
No. I mean, it's definitely like odd enough that you're like, okay, that has to mean something. Yeah. So anyways, I just think that Rune's mom, like, it just makes the most amount of sense for it to be Rune's sister. There's no other way around it at this point.
Wait, why am I kind of living for this?
I love it. I think it would be amazing to have her come into play and see them reunite. I think it'd be amazing.
Well, also, that would totally expand the inner circle because hypothetically speaking, let's run with this. If Bryce and Az were actually mates and then Rune was related to Reese and brought Lydia into the inner circle, living for all of that.
Well, wow, this is such a complicated theory, and I don't want to talk about it this time, but I've mentioned it briefly, was my overarching theory of there becoming a court of realms that, like, rule essentially all of the worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I want to dive more into it next time, but I think that would make the most amount of sense. I just think that we had the crossover, happened. But people are like, oh, we never got like a ton of crossover in CC3 or whatever. But I'm like, you all are forgetting that this now has opened the door for it to happen again. Like, I think that we are not done seeing the crossovers at all.
No. Also, this is so random. I saw a TikTok of this, so I have actually none of the actual information. But somebody mentioned that somewhere, I think it was in CC3, they mentioned that Bryce is a descendant of the last High King. And somebody mentioned, obviously, in ACOTAR, or I guess Silver Flames, we see that Feyre and Reese are talking about potentially becoming High King with the power of
Gwydion and
and everything like that. And I just had never thought of that. And I was like, oh, is that going to be connected somehow?
I don't know. We'll talk more. I think let's talk next time of like where we think it's all going.
Yeah,
because I think that definitely ties into it. But I just think that it's really interesting. I'm gonna be honest. I think that we were going somewhere with this whole Starborn stuff and like the sword and the dagger and like all this stuff. and then it just never fully came to a satisfying like conclusion. I feel like Bryce, I felt like honestly was maybe meant to be a bigger role than she ended up actually being.
Yeah, and with Cassian and Nesta's bargain appearing as the 8-pointed star and everything, that has to be connected. There's no way she can casually throw out an 8-pointed star.
Yes. Well, okay, and then this is something I actually didn't catch this first time, because we obviously see that like Bryce gets that like the 8-pointed star like scarred onto like her chest.
Yeah.
Originally I was like, what does it even do and what does it mean? I was so confused. I don't know why I didn't catch on to this until literally on my way here when I was listening to the last like 2 chapters of Crescent City 2, when Regulus, whatever his name is explaining and talking to them when they're in Pangea or whatever. He tells her, he's like, do you know what that star is? And she's like, enlighten me. And he's like, it lights for the people who have direct descendants or like direct bloodlines from the ancient Fae world, like Cormac. And he was like, Cormac is like basically like a direct bloodline descendant of one of the Fae from Prythian, which I don't know from who or what, but that's what he says. And then
it lights for Rune too. Yeah,
and it lights for Rune. And then she was like, well, it lights for Hunt. And he's like, well, it also lights for the people that are your protectors, that like, or like the people that you choose, like essentially as your court, like that are like your knights, is what he says. And I was like, that's what it does? Why was I literally thinking that? I didn't know what it meant. Yeah. But I was like, oh.
As of right now, I don't think we've gotten adequate description of what her power actually does. She seems like an industrial nightlight.
Exactly.
Pretty much. Like
essentially. But I just thought it was interesting because I had this theory of like maybe there's some significance in like being marked by the 8-pointed star, like how Cassian and Nesta were and then Bryce was, things like that, and maybe that'll come into play more later. But I'm like, I thought that there might be a significance in being marked by it.
Interesting, because we know
that's the only time I can see it going anywhere.
CC3 in the crossover, it primarily focuses with Nesta and Azriel.
Yeah.
So I mean, it would make sense that Bryce would mark Nesta maybe as like one of her knights or something along those lines. But I guess it appears in Silver Flames, which maybe somehow it knows that she's going to be marked. Or
I don't know. It's just super interesting. So I don't know where it's going exactly, but I didn't realize that about the star because I was confused why it would like light for Cormac. And that's why. It's because he's like a direct bloodline descendant, and I didn't know that.
That's not ominous at all.
Yeah, exactly. But there was something else I was gonna say, and now I just lost my train of thought. It'll come to me. It'll come back. Oh, this is my last thought. Is the one thing that is frustrating to me, and it's consistent in CC3 too, is that in CC1, part of like Bryce's like character like struggle is that, and like misbelief is that she struggles feeling like she doesn't have a role. She's like, Danica was always like meant to like be this amazing leader, like the strongest of her kind. Fury has whatever Fury does. Juniper has ballet, and she was going to become this amazing like world-renowned ballet dancer, whatever. And she's like, and then there's me. And she like always just like wanted like a role or like a place.
Yeah.
And so then I was frustrated when that was like the struggle that she was having, and then slowly it starts to build to like her having this like role in this like over essentially like rebellion and things like that, just for her to get to the end of CC3 and be like opening up an antique bookstore, whatever, and Nolan voiding it all. I'm not going to become the queen or the princess. Like she starts to become like she has this opportunity to become queen of the Fae, and she's like, no. Like, she starts fighting against it in CC2, and I'm like, why? Because this is all you've ever wanted, was to have, like, this role, this part in your life, and, like, have this, like, specific thing, and you're basically now fighting against it? I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense.
I have issues with Bryce's character arc in general, because I think it was on a really great trajectory after CC1, and then I think it just, like we said, got lost in the sauce, and she had no idea where she was supposed to be at the end.
It's hers and Hunt's both, because also with Hunt's, we start, like, in the first book, he's, like, working behind the, like, 33rd's back, like, trading synth or whatever, and then is, like, trying to like start another rebellion, and then in CC2 and then especially in CC3 is like, wait, no, like let's not do this, like this is bad, and it's like I don't want to do this, and I'm like, you can't go back. You've already established that you want to do something and you want to help the situation. And why, as the books progressed and the story progressed, were you more and more like, no? I'm like,
Yeah.
what? That didn't make any sense.
He did feel a little bit more, and maybe it's because we didn't know him, but he was more morally gray with like the Umbra Mortis, like hard exterior type. And then in these books, I don't know what he is doing. He's like, whatever Bryce tells me to do, that's fine.
He's a big baby is what he is. He's like, oh, no, that's hard. You're going to die. Or no, we can't be doing that. And I'm like, okay, get over it.
Also, I feel like Hunt has a lot of trauma after being tattooed again and everything like that. And Bryce is like, suck it up, buddy. You can do it. And then anytime he has an emotional moment or needs a minute, she's like, no, suck it up. And I'm like, wow, we are really not acknowledging his trauma. Like, she's like, it's me. It's my trauma, not you.
Yeah. Anyway, so I just think that there was some inconsistencies with some of the character arcs, and they start to come out in CC2, which is just so sad, because CC1 truly, I think, was setting this up to be something crazy amazing. And yes, is the fact that the crossover happened so cool? Yes. Like, I don't think you will ever get something so significant in a book series like that again. Like, that's just so unique to Sarah J Maas, and to have that overlap and to have that like scene is so cool. But that does not make up to make this book the most amazing book I've ever read. In fact, I would probably rank it as one of the lower books of hers.
I think House of Sky and Breath is definitely one of my least favorite books that she's ever written.
Same. Just because of the inconsistencies of plot and character arc. Like, it just doesn't make it... A lot of it just didn't make any sense.
And it's almost like a transition book, because not very much happens, but it's also like 800 pages. And no transition book needs to be 800 pages.
No, definitely not. So I was just kind of over it by the end, and just love the ending. I think it's so cool, but that just doesn't make up for it being an amazing book. But I think that's all my thoughts on CC2. Do you have anything else?
Oh, no, just everybody buckle up for next week, because
I'm so excited. There's a couple more theories that we have that will kind of wrap up our SJM and kind of where we think things are going. Also, I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that maybe something will get announced in the next week. So before our episode, that would be amazing.
Yes.
But we'll keep you guys updated. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. I know that was kind of crazy chaotic, but...
Yeah, we had a good maybe 10 minutes there where we were not even making any sense.
I'm so sorry. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure that you guys follow us on all of our social media pages. That's just LA Reads Podcast. Also, if you are wanting to do a sponsorship or a partnership of any sort, you can email us at lareadspod@gmail.com. We would love to get some sponsorships. That would be really dope.
Yep, it's also in our TikTok bio and Instagram, all social media.
Yeah, you can find it there. So thank you guys so much. Make sure that you watch the rest of our episodes and tune in next week for our last SJM episode. And yeah, we will see you all next week. Bye! Wow, the passion we had for CC2 got so